work at a bar. They've been closed for 3 years. I started work back in May at a bar and grill in Sterling Heights, Michigan. The name isn't important, especially after what I found out recently. I wouldn't want any of you to go through what I did. I applied online after seeing that it shut down last year for remodeling and was about to open again. I got an email not even 20 minutes later asking if I'd be available for an interview. The next day I'd gotten the job as a hostess, not long after sitting down with the manager. The next few weeks went smoothly. It was constantly busy, and I always worked with the same servers and cooks, so I got their names down easily. A lot of the customers were familiar faces after a while. It fell into a routine. Same people at the same time, same conversations. Granted, that should have thrown me off. One night, I walked by the booth that Gary and Anne always sat in and heard them talking about a prison escape in New York. They had talked about it the night before, too. I did remember thinking that I hadn't heard anything about prisoners breaking out of a prison, but I just shrugged it off. I was never up to date on the news anyhow. The first time I really noticed how strange the bar seemed was when people started calling. The first phone call was at 1:12 a.m. I remember the time specifically because I was told I could cut 1:15 and was counting down the minutes. Here's how I'm pretty sure the conversation went. "Hello, this is Laura. How can I help you?" Muffled screams. I heard a loud crash, like something falling from a few feet up, followed by more screams. My hand gripped the phone and started to tingle with nervousness. "Ma'am, it's hard to hear anything. I'm getting a lot of static and noise in the background." "It's burning. Oh God, please help." The screams continued. The woman I was speaking to joined in, and the next thing I knew, I heard the phone hitting the floor. I almost dropped the one I was holding, but I kept listening for something, anything. All I heard were screams and what sounded like crackling. It suddenly became too much, and I hung up. I grabbed my manager and asked if I should call the police. My manager didn't react at all like I'd hoped, and instead she laughed. "Good one, Laura. We haven't hooked up our phones yet. You can go home now. Maybe your ghost emergency will be waiting for you here tomorrow." She giggled at me before walking off. I frowned, and she turned around to glance at me one more time. I swear her teeth weren't normal. They looked animalistic. But I chalked it up to my imagination still on fire from the call, and I wasn't going to hesitate on leaving. The rest of the night went on without anything weird happening. I got home and sighed the stress of the night off. My dad was surprisingly still awake, and as soon as he walked in my room, he made a face, then asked why I smelled like smoke. I shrugged. We have quite a few smokers in the bar. Maybe that was it. Nothing I thought too hard about in the moment. The same phone call happened again the next night, and every night after that. I started to dread 1:12 a.m., but tonight, this one was different. My phone rang at the normal time, but when I picked up, there was zero static, no screams. "Hello, this is... Heidi? Is that you?" The voice rang with disbelief. "No, this is Laura. Can I help you with something?" "Excuse me? What did you just say?" I repeated my usual line, but was cut off. "How dare you? Do you think this is funny?" I blinked a few times and looked around. Had this been a prank the entire time? "Ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about. Do you want to order carry-out?" "Stop! You're making a joke out of a tragedy. This phone is my sister's. I know the police never recovered it, but that doesn't mean you can go rummaging around to find it and play around with." The woman sounded close to tears, and I was about there myself. I was confused. I don't understand. This is the phone to the restaurant." "The restaurant is in ashes! You're disgusting!" I heard a few sobs, then the phone cut out abruptly. I went to hang up, and that's when it all changed. The phone I looked at wasn't the same one I'd been using. It was a small flip phone. It was burnt to the point where I was unsure how I had managed to close it without it crumbling to pieces. My mouth hung open, and when I looked up, it was worse. All the TVs that once lined the walls were either cracked or were on the ground surrounded by ash. Glasses were shattered everywhere. What remained of the chairs and tables had been toppled over, like people had been running to escape the flames. The door was stained with ashy handprints, but none of that was the worst part. The bodies still lay in the spots they had died. Some bodies had been crushed by poles or ceiling fans, unrecognizable through their flattened and charred faces and limbs. Some slumped over in front of the door, where they probably did their best to survive, mouths burned into an eternal scream. I spotted Gary and Anne next to the window, and I couldn't help but crumple next to them. They never made any sense to me, but they had loved one another well into their 80s. Their hands were still intertwined. Then the echoing started, the screams, the crackling. It finally hit me. I ran out of the bar and jumped into my car, the only one in the parking lot. I glanced over at the bar and instead found an empty lot. As I drove away, I thought I saw a figure in my rearview mirror. She looked a lot like my manager, her limbs stretched out, her jaw looking unhinged as it hung open like she wanted to swallow me whole. Her body completely burnt, but she was alive. I mean, she wasn't dead. A few minutes ago, I looked up the bar itself. I found multiple articles. 3 years ago, the bar and grill I had worked at fell victim to a freak accident fire. Every victim perished. Or at least the police guessed they did, since no bodies were ever found. In fact, nothing had ever been recovered. Phones, wallets, clothing, all gone. I can't do anything but cry. I'm so sad for all the people in that bar, but I'm also scared. When I filled out my paperwork with my manager, I gave her my address. And right now, I smell smoke.